Okay, good evening, folks. You're all very welcome along to the fifth webinar in the summer webinar series for the GAA Coach and Player Development. This evening we're looking at developing Gamespeed. We have our presenters Neil Welch and Mike McGurn. Just a quick word on both. Neil, PhD is the lead S&C coach for Kildare Senior Footballers, consults as an expert in applied biomechanics and rehabilitation. He's a PhD in the biomechanics of injury and performance during change of direction, and over 15 years of experience as a strength and conditioning and rehab coach across multiple sports. We also have Mike McGurn, who's an international strength and conditioning coach. He's the prestigious honour of training 3 national senior Irish teams in different codes and winning 2 world titles in 2 different sports. Mike has been a professional S&C coach for over 25 years, and some of the teams and organisations he has worked with includes the Armagh GAA Footballers, Louth, Antrim, Ireland International Rules, Hull City, Leeds United, Everton, Man United and Cliftonville. Has worked with various rugby league and rugby union teams, and has also worked with athletics, boxing and swimming through Commonwealth Games and including World Finalists. I am Owen McNichol, Sports Science Officer for Ulster GAA, and I'll be hosting this evening. But before that, we're going to hand over to Roy O'Donnell of RYPT Training. He's going to run through just a couple of things before we start. Over to you, Roy.
Perfect. Thanks, Owen. Firstly, from all of us at RYPT, just a massive thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to a great session with Neil and Mike this evening. For anyone who might be unfamiliar with RYPT, we are the official athlete management software provider for the GAA. And clubs can actually get up to 10% off of the system. So if anybody's interested in learning more about RYPT and what it provides, you can visit the website at rypt.app, or if you'd like to get in touch with me at Ruai or UAI or I at rypt.app as well. We can set up a call and bring you through the system and look at it from there. So what RYPT is RYPT brings together the tools that you need for the day-to-day running of your team, all into one place. So there's no kind of jumping or hopping between different apps, tools and spreadsheets that you might use. So if you use a wellness app or a load monitoring app or a nutrition app or any of those things, RYPT brings it all into one and consolidates all of those systems. So you'll see RYPT in action a bit during today's session. So Mike is going to cover load management and what that looks like in practice. And Neil's going to talk through some scheduling and programming for athletes as well. And those are just a small part of the RYPT offering and the RYPT solution. And you can see more on screen here about what the full offering is. So there's things like the team management side. So there's a shared calendar, chat function, attendance tracking. And then there's more in-depth features such as athlete growth and maturation tracking, which is a really interesting side to the product as well. For developing and protecting youth athletes. So yeah, thanks very much for that, and I'll hand it over to Mike now.
Thanks, Roy. Let's see. Share content. Just 1 second. Okay, and can you see that okay?
Okay.
Perfect.
Good. Okay. Evening, folks. Thanks for coming along. I'm going to speak about speed training fundamentals and, more importantly, Gamespeed to GAA. Okay, how it's built, how we train it, and we want to do this without breaking your players. So, as Owen adequately said, I've been involved in sport for 25 plus years, and I've made all the mistakes. And once you make all the mistakes, you know what actually works. And I made a lot of mistakes when it came to developing speed. Namely, for me, speed is probably the most misunderstood quality within the GAA, and that's the same as many other sports. Reason being is speed's multi-directional. A lot of times in the gym, as you're going to see in this video example, we train a lot in a vertical force, but you also need to include horizontal force, what we're doing here in the speed thing. So where programming goes wrong for speed, in my eyes, is number one, we do too many reps of what we think is speed, okay? We don't need a lot of reps. It's about quality, not quantity. The other element about our speed mistakes that we make is we cover too much distance, okay? Anything above 30, 40 meters, we're no longer training speed, all right? One of the massive red flags for me when it comes to speed training, not only in GAA, but in most sports that we do, field sports, soccer, rugby, there's not enough recovery. And we'll talk about programming guidelines towards the end, okay? And this is my own personal opinion. Some may agree, some may not agree, but that's what we're here tonight is there's not enough lower body strength work done to develop speed. And the bottom line is, from my experience, unless we get our legs stronger, our athletes will not get quicker, okay? And I suppose at this point, it's worth putting in the caveat that, okay, the reality with speed is some of us are born quick, some of us aren't born that quick. The incremental gains you'll get are incremental, but anything that we can do that's going to make our athletes quicker, we have to try and put into our programming, okay? Probably one of the other elements that's not put in these guidelines here, which I should have put in, is, and it's probably that I just assume it too much, speed will never be developed unless the athlete's fresh, okay? And I realize as a club coach, as an inter-county coach, your players are never 100% fresh, but you need to pick up a time in the training week where they're as fresh as they can be and do your speed down, okay? And that's why something like having a RYPT app, which I used extensively last year with the team, made my prescription when I did speed very, very precise. So when I look at the metrics, muscle soreness, tiredness, sleep duration, stress, if I have any athletes that have a red in their metrics, and I look at what it's telling me, 95% of the time, those particular athletes will not do speed the next day for training. And how this works is each player that I work with, each athlete, would report into me before 12 o'clock that day for a 6 o'clock training session. So that gives me a 6-hour window to plan who's doing speed, and if they're not doing speed, what are they doing? But using something like RYPT takes out the guessing and makes things a lot more precise. And I found that very, very beneficial when planning my training, especially when it comes to powerlifting, Olympic lifting, speed training. Okay? So that was my opinion, but I also like to back my opinions, my anecdotal evidence with science, okay? So what the experts say? Well, Lauren Seagrave, a brilliant sprint coach, the key to speed is applying large forces through appropriate ranges of motion, okay? So not only vertical, like we said, also horizontal and multi-directional over increasingly shorter periods of time. Charlie Francis, to go faster, you need more force. And Charlie was a very, very controversial coach, but a fantastic sprint coach. A lot of his athletes won golds at Olympics in 100 meters. And a more scientific approach by Dr. Peter Wayne said, the key to human speed is simple, applying large mass-specific forces to the ground quickly. So it comes back to my point, if we want our athletes to get quicker, we've got to get them stronger in the legs, okay? You can do all the technique work you want, you can do all the jumping over hurdles, you can all the quick feet through ladders, but unless you get your legs stronger and you can't apply that stronger forces into the ground, you will not go quicker horizontally, okay? So, get stronger and most GA players will get faster, okay? And we need a blend of max strength, explosive strength, and reactive strength to give us that speed element. Some of our max strength, which produce high forces, that gives us a higher multi-unit recruitment. We're looking at heavy squats, deadlifts, RDLs, okay? All the rest with good technique, okay? That's the caveat. We're going to do these exercises to get our athletes quicker. They must have good technique. Our more explosive strength exercises, which increase our rate of force development, our medicine ball throws, our various jumps, vertical, horizontal, bounding, plyos, and loaded sprint activities, okay? And some examples, okay? So this is a 400-meter runner, Rachel McCann. She just won the Irish Championship there on Sunday. She's working here in a predominantly vertical force, okay? So what she's going to do here is load up, prime up the body, doing a front squat. I think she's squatting 90K there with pretty good technique. Not perfect, but it's safe. It's not going to injure her, okay? So Rachel will prime up the body, rack the bar, and then she'll apply that reactive force to a banded squat jump. So a very, very simplistic way of sort of really manipulating the body to get a load to the system and then actually put it into practice. So that's in a vertical context, okay? This is more a horizontal example for athletes, and it's just applying those horizontal forces. So we can do like a modified jammer. We get a TRX attached to a squat rack, attach it to a barbell, and get our athlete to explode and push up in a horizontal manner, okay? Another way is put a band around the waist and just do a simple jump, okay? And the other element of that is if they can really stick their landing, then we get some sort of like rehab, prehab for that ACL, PCL prevention, okay? This is more of a swimming example, and we're going to look at both horizontal and vertical, okay? So again, it's a 165k deadlift, okay, in the vertical vector. So we loaded the body, and then we're going to prime it, or we prime the body, then we're going to apply it. So I love box jumps, which I've shown to really help improve significant speed elements in athletes. The only one that I would say is if you're going to do a box jump, always step off like you see the athlete doing. Don't jump back, because that can cause injury. So step off before we load up. And then put in this in a complete vertical or horizontal vector, because this particular athlete's a swimmer. And if you look to the right of the screen, we're trying to work on the swim start. So we're loading with a bungee and then getting the athlete to do a sport-specific type element, okay? And then if you have no equipment at all, okay, you can use just body weight exercises. So just a simple single leg explosive bench jump. And then we know to become faster, sprinters require push force. Then we can add in some element of push force. Again, really doing that overspeed element, okay? So some very simplistic ideas. When it comes to the more plow element, we can do like a squat jump. We have the athlete use a hex bar, okay? Not real heavy. And at this point, it's worth pointing out that some of the mistakes that our athletes make when trying to develop speed is they go too heavy on the load. So the optimum load for a squat jump is 40% of their 1RM max. So if the 1RX squat is 40k or is 100k, 40k is plenty on the squat jump, okay? A more advanced but brilliant technique for producing speed is what we call a depth jump, where the athlete jumps off a height, has very quick ground contact time, very little ground contact time, and explodes up into another height, okay? And a very good coaching cue I give here is imagine you're in bare feet and you're jumping on broken glass. You don't want to cut your feet. So it's a very, very quick slap and gone. And that's how we create speed on the pitch, okay? And again, if your athlete is fairly new and you don't have a lot of time to coach the more intricate types of lift, a very, very simple type barbell jammer exercise. This is Paul Brady. Some of you will know from Cavan. He's a world champion handballer and also an inter-county footballer. When I was working with Paul, I didn't have time to teach the Olympic lifts like I would with a normal athlete. So this is a very, very simple method of getting that triple extension that creates speed and getting a load through. So if we watch what Paul does here, if you look at the ankle, knee and hip on his right side, we're getting that huge extension. And that's one of the physical qualities we really need to develop in the gym that transfers out on the pitch, okay? And then that continues through the upper body, so also getting that upper body element. Okay, and Paul's producing a lot of power here in this example, which can be used both for handball and out in the pitch for Gaelic football, okay? So, and Neil will talk more about this in his presentation, but there's so many sub-qualities of speed: acceleration, top speed, max velocity, speed reserve, change of direction, agility, repeat sprint ability, and speed endurance. And as S&C coaches, we have to cover all of those within our training remit. So there's a lot of things we have to cover. We don't have to cover them all the time. For me, one of the biggest go-tos is acceleration, because Acceleration is that getting that speed over the first 5 to 10 meters. So if you're a corner forward, it's getting out in front of the corner back. If you're a halfback, it's getting out in front when the ball comes in front of the corner forward. So acceleration is really enhanced from getting stronger in the gym and getting the legs stronger. Okay. How would a speed session look for me? Well, here's 4 simple slides. I always start with some single leg work through ladders. Okay, both legs, double leg, warm the body up. Warm up lasts no more than 15 minutes for a speed session. Then I'll do 3 loaded sprints. Could be with a sled, could be with a bungee. Okay. Now, when we're doing sled running to develop speed, unlike when I said with the squat jumps, it was 40% of your 1 RM. We measured it off the body weight. So when we're doing sled runs, the optimum percentage is 10 to 12.5% of the body weight that you put on the sled. So this particular athlete weighed 85 kilograms. So he'd be having around sort of 8.5 to 10 kilograms only on the back of that sled. Any heavier, and it doesn't allow you to get that physical adaptation you're looking to do. Okay. So we've done 3 loaded sprints with full recovery. And then we'll do an absolute pure speed. Okay. No more than 5 meters. Okay. And I'll talk about recovery in a second. And once I've done my pure speed, then I'll do some type of agility element. Okay. Out 5, side 5, back in, and back to the start. And that is how simple it needs to be. Where the mistakes are made in this is the distances run are too quick, or too long, sorry, and the recovery is too quick. We need to elongate the recovery. Okay, I'll skip this one here. So, some guidelines on programming. Okay, let's make it practical. So, what we look for when we're working on speed is always quality. The quality of speed is more important, more so than the volume. But the big thing is, and unless you have a GPS, you have to rely on the honesty of our athletes. If your athletes want to be faster, they have to sprint at 100%. Okay, it can't be 95%, it can't be 96%, it has to be 100% flat out. All right. So, a couple of things before I finish off. For GAA team sessions, a general guide. For every rep that you're sprinting, it should be no more than 40 meters. Okay, even less. For every 10 meters you cover, you must take 1 minute recovery. So if you're going to sprint 20 meters, that means a 2 minute recovery. How you fill that time's up to you. I normally include some type of skill element or some type of mobility element. I just don't leave the player stand waiting for 2 minutes. We fill it with something meaningful. Okay. And the total volume of the speed session, okay, including the warm up, should be no more than 300 meters. Okay. When it comes to doing flat out sprints, once you've done a loaded sprint, it's no more than 4 to 6 max flat out sprints. And that's where I see the mistakes being made. We're doing too many so-called sprints. There's too many reps and there's not enough recovery. Okay. But the big take home for me is that speed training needs intent on every rep. And that goes with everything that we do in S&C. The athlete has to bring the intent. Okay. They have to sprint 100% flat out. Okay. And that's me, folks.
Right, thanks very much. That was very informative. I suppose what we will do, if anybody does have any questions now, just put them in the chat box, and at the very end of the presentation of Niels, what we'll do is we'll put them all together. So look, Mike, thanks very much. Very informative again, and a lot of things to think about. Neil, if you're happy, we are going to go across to yourself. So whenever you're ready.
Right. Do we have the screen?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep. Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Mike. Very good intro to speed training around GAA. Hopefully I can follow on. Thanks very much to everyone for taking time out of your day to watch this presentation as well. So I'm going to talk about the agility and the change direction side of things within my presentation. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I moved to Ireland about 13 years ago to work at the sports surgery clinic in Santry. We had a large expertise, I guess, around ACL and groin rehabilitation and injury in particular. And that's where change direction quality is a really important component as part of the rehab and prevention. So I learned a lot there and developed a lot of my practice. I've done 6 seasons with Kildare now, short hiatus after a spell with Cian O'Neill in the last couple of years under Brian Flanagan. So applying these principles in the higher end of the intercounty game. While I was at the Sports Surgery Clinic, I did my PhD in applied biomechanics. So this was focusing specifically on change direction mechanics and injury risk. I'm currently working as a consultant at Man United, working on athletic development with their first team as well. So what I'm hoping to do is kind of bring together some of the experiences I've had in and around change direction and how you can apply it within your settings. In order to do that, I think what's important is for us as coaches to understand what we think good and bad technique looks like. And I'm going to focus very much on the technique side of things tonight. And I'm going to start with the bad side of things. But from an agility perspective, we've got a couple of ways that we can kind of introduce this to our sessions. One, and the earliest and the easiest way, is through planned change direction movements. So Mike gave an example in his presentation there with that kind of 5-meter L run. And that's where the athlete knows what direction they're going to change in, how far they're going to run, and they can kind of go all out or work on the technique of the drill. True agility is when you bring in a reactive component. So the athlete is having to respond to a cue that's in front of them. So that could be verbal, it could be a noise, it could be responding to another opponent or a pass. And then in the competitive end, I guess, is when we start thinking about the tactical agility. So how are you going to use your movement patterns to achieve specific team tactical goals? For example, like if you want to force a change in a point of attack or to slow down momentum in a transition. Once we have developed quality agility skills, and then we can start applying it in those scenarios as well. So I'm just going to play a couple of examples here. I'm going to just wave my cursor around the middle of the screen. I want you to focus on this athlete. Okay, I'll slow down in a second, and I want you to concentrate on the trunk position. So what you see on this first deceleration into the direction change is that trunk is near vertical, kind of perpendicular to the ground. And that results in a poor deceleration and change direction. The second one, he adopts a much better body position. Center of mass is lower, and he's got that forwards trunk lean in place. And that becomes important because if you approach a direction change, as in the first example, the best analogy I can think of is like a double-decker bus going around a corner. So you become top heavy and you can't control your direction change and apply force effectively to the ground. The second option is when we start getting closer to our Formula One car at cornering. We've got a much lower center of gravity, and that makes the direction change better. So if you to take one thing from tonight's presentation, it's that difference between the vertical trunk and the forward trunk lean within the approach to the direction change. Another fault then is around the tactical side. So in this instance, we're trying to cut down the options of the cork player here. You've got the sideline next to you to act as another defender, and we've caught up with him, so we're not too worried about our speed. However, what we do by going past him on the shoulder and almost kind of rounding in front of him is we offer up that inside option. So instead of being very aware of our surroundings and starting to slow down on the approach to this player, we make a tactical error that is in effect something we can train with our agility training. We also have to be cautious about the way we coach and the directions we give our players. So in this instance, the player is trying to block a pass, or at least provide a visual stimulus to block a pass. What they do by throwing their arms up in the air, and actually in this instance, feet leave the ground a little bit, is you take yourself off the floor and able to change direction again. So what we have to ask ourselves here in this situation is what's going to be the most important thing for the athlete to be able to do? To respond and change direction, or to cut out that pass down the sideline. Arguably, I think the direction change is a more important one. Obviously, the space opens up inside there as a result of this error. So we just have to be cognizant of what we're asking our players to do and what that does to their ability to change direction. And then, of course, injury is a key component of the technical aspects. So in this instance, we've got our vertical trunk. We don't really do much deceleration before the direction change. And this final step becomes a deceleration and an acceleration stop at the same time. We get caught in that upright position and we end up with a ruptured ACL. So from a safety perspective, I think training agility and training agility technique is probably one of the more important things we can do with our athletes. And we can keep them away from these type of ACL injuries or the chronic groin conditions that we saw so much of when I was working in the sports surgery clinic. Now, here's what it looks like when it looks good. So again, now we've got a bit of an idea in our head of the positions we want to see. Have a look at our male player here and the body position he adopts. So he doesn't come away of that forward trunk lean position. And what that allows him to do, and obviously Mike spoke about earlier about being able to express force rapidly into the ground. We still have those underlying strength qualities present, but he's put himself in a position to be able to better execute and create that force into the floor. What you'll see then also in the Armagh defender is under this pressure, he ends up rocking back onto his heels, and he himself is unable to change direction effectively. So the step inside from the male player takes the Armagh player off balance, puts himself in a position where he's dominant in that movement. In this instance, we've got a couple of good body positions, really. I don't think there's too much we can say about the defensive body positions as being bad. We get into a good low body position. The weight is on the front of the foot. The Monaghan player just adopts a good body position as well and has a little bit of forward momentum that the Tyrone player doesn't. So she comes to a standstill, whereas the Monaghan player carries a little bit of momentum forward, and that gives her the edge on the acceleration there. So again, I think some elements of being able to use agility in your game scenarios comes down to the cards you're dealt at that instant. So if you're carrying momentum forward and the defender isn't, then you have every advantage to take them on, and that's something we can kind of coach athletes and build confidence around doing with the way we set up in our training. And here's just a really good example of some direction changes in a defensive movement as well. Our Dublin defender here, so that forward trunk position stays consistent all the time. He's able to execute multiple movements and stick with his attacker. And again, that's a very challenging thing to do when, particularly when you're having to track somebody over multiple direction changes. So there's a very good bit of movement there. So what we then need to try and understand is, okay, if we've kind of thought about this as a movement quality or a skill that we want to embed into our training, how do we go about building that into our training week? So I think you've only got a finite amount of time with your athletes. And in general, when we're talking about GAA, without the game of the weekend, you're going to have 2 pitch sessions. And ultimately, you have the warm-ups for those sessions. And then you have your two gym sessions around that usually. So the amount of this work you do is dictated by how you prioritize it. So if, say, the work that Mike was talking about around maximum speed is a higher priority for you and your athletes, then you're gonna spend a little bit more time in your warm-ups and your gym sessions working on that. Now, obviously, there's going to be some crossover when we're talking about the explosive work and to change direction. Whereas if your focus is on change direction technique, then you're going to spend a little bit more volume on that. The way we can train technique, though, means that we can actually get quite a lot of volume into our movements. So I kind of break our change direction movements down into 4 categories. Position, where we're trying to teach the athlete the key body positions we want them getting into, and then timing. Timing would be where we're focusing on the fluidity of the movement in particular, rather than maximum speed, and getting comfortable with the body positions we've been teaching them. There's a lower energy cost to this, so we can get a little bit more volume in, and we can do that a little bit more frequently. Whereas when we're looking at maximum force and maximum speed, as Mike kind of alluded to there, the reps and the volume is much smaller, and we need ample recovery between. On that, and kind of backing up Mike's points, the demand that follows from the maximum force and maximum speed work is high. So we need to make sure that the volume is low and we've adequate rest. And then for anybody who has, we identify as maybe being of risk of injury, if we started to work up with a group of athletes and we're starting to notice some of these maybe more risky body positions, this is a really important component of injury prevention within the group. It doesn't matter how strong your quad is, if you get into those very upright body positions during a direction change, you're at risk of picking up an ACL injury or chronic groin injury. So within the training week, this is how I tend to lay it out. Again, if I'm thinking I've got a couple of pitch sessions on a Tuesday and Thursday, and I have a bit of a priority around direction change within the gym, I have some categories of warm-up elements where I'm working on some hip strength that's important to prevent groin pain. I'll have my gym warm-up, which will include some of the change direction movements, and then some explosive and strength stuff within the training session. On pitch, similar. So I'll pre-planned all my hip work and my warm-up, but I'll have change of direction, specific blocks within that. And what that looks like within the training session then is a couple of drills. You know, I mentioned some of the timing drills where I might be looking at some of the transition movements. So in this example, again, building some basic triangles with some of the cones, where we're trying to get fluidity with an out and back movement. I said, like, these movements don't have to be very complicated, but you can see the body positions that I'm trying to work to, where I've got that forward trunk lean and my head up, and try and build some fluidity into the movement. Similarly, if I were looking to develop some attacking movements, some attacking side steps, we build in our drop squat, so we're lowering our center of mass, and we just get some fluidity and rhythm between dropping that center of mass lower and trying to express force to push yourself sideways into the ground. Okay, so once you've got a good idea of those qualities that you're looking to develop, you need volume applying them, and the athlete needs to get used to feeling those body positions. So if you're to take a few things from the presentation and try and apply it to your training, either for Thursday night tomorrow or in the next couple of weeks when you work with your athletes again, the first thing I'd ask you to do is try and observe your athletes in a change direction scenario. So these could be in your small-sided games, and look out for the number of them who approach the change direction with that vertical trunk position, and in defensive positions when they have their weight on their heels. When you start identifying the numbers that move like that, you'll start to get a bit of an idea of the prioritization you need to set towards it. Second, when you're trying to coach them, is to offer them an alternative to the movement. So you need to show them the difference between what the good and the bad movements look like. So we coach them into those kind of lower trunk flexed, hip flexed body positions that we've talked about this evening. And then we move them back into that bad position during some of the movements, and they'll feel the difference between the two. As soon as they feel that difference, then they're more likely to start adopting those new and hopefully safer body positions. And then the final one, if you view it as important, is to start making it a part of what you do. So structuring your warm-ups within the gym sessions and on pitch to start helping your athletes, as I said, become skilled at agility and change direction movements. And continuing to embed the importance of the change direction technique points. So dipping back into point 2 here every so often and showing them the difference between good and bad. And over time, you will make a difference in the way your athletes move on pitch. Thanks very much for listening to the presentation this evening. And it'd be great if you've got some questions that we can talk through with you.
Thanks, Neil. Again, very informative. Lots of real good examples I think we can all take away and apply straight into our coaching sessions. I have, I suppose, one question as an S&C coach, and maybe there's a lot of people on here who are club coaches. What myths or common misconceptions like about speed development would you say are most common out there? Like a lot of coaches thinking, what can I do? What can I not do? What's a fad or what's a myth? Or Mike, do you want to jump in there? You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Myths, God, there's plenty of those. It always comes back to the same thing. I think, Owen, that, speed, you can only improve it incrementally, but so we've got to take every advantage you can, like Neil alluded to. I think it's not a myth, it's a practice, is you've got to do your speed and agility and all your speed at the start of the session. It's pointless doing it at the end, and I don't know, does that still take place? But as Neil said, if that becomes part of every single warm-up, you're going to get incremental gains over the course of a season. It's what we call microdosing. You microdose over the course of a season. If you have 100 training sessions and you're doing it twice a week, that's 200 sessions. So you're going to get some return, hopefully. But for me, myths, I suppose training players slowly in pre-season is going to blunt any benefit of speed development in season. So if you want to play fast, train fast.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, because a lot of teams I know of are very much heavy in the endurance phase and pre-season, and they don't do a lot of speed work. And then when it comes to the crunch, they're trying to cram a lot of that stuff in later on in the year.
Yeah.
Perfect. Jack has actually had a message into the chat box there asking yourself, is it difficult to incorporate ball into speed development?
It's best not to. It's best not to. I mean, okay, if you drop the ball, and we talk about technique. I know your technique changes with the ball under the arm, okay, but by and large, if you do most of your speed development for me without the ball and focus on the speed, okay, get from A to B as quick as you can, okay, I do appreciate if you're running with a ball, the speed technique changes, but by and large, work on the pure speed element and then get some sort of transference into the real game.
Brilliant. If anybody else has any questions, guys, you can put them into the chat box. Just last one over to me. I'm going to fire over to Neil there. Like if you were taking, like you have worked with senior inter-county before, and if you were taking over a senior inter-county team tomorrow, how would you assess their game speed, and like what would an annual plan or a block of plans kind of look for you? Like just giving this for a novice coach who might be on this evening, have no idea how to progress it or where to start from.
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing I do is try and observe them. So just set up some drills where you might have, say, 3 groups running through some sort of and even just like the type of thing that Mike had set up there with the L run, is just start to get a bit of a sense of who is good and bad at it, because some of the athletes are going to need a little bit more kind of help than others, and then when it becomes part of your warm-ups, when you've got a group of say 20, 30 athletes who are kind of running through the movements, it really starts to sharpen up your coaching eye. In the same way with the speed work, is when you've got everyone's running their strides and their reps at the front end of the session, you can get really good quite quickly as a coach at picking out the athletes who need a bit more help with their technique. And you can start coaching in kind of smaller one-on-one, one-on-two kind of scenarios within that group. But the first thing to do is just to start having a go at it. If you're unsure, like I said, what you're trying to do during a direction change is just lower the center of mass and keep the head in front of the hips as you go through through that direction change. Like the worst thing is to step back and not do it because you're a little bit worried about what might happen. I do think it's a really important part of the game, and it's a really important part of a play welfare, is adding this to programs, and I think a lot of the time it's missing.
Okay, perfect. Jack's just come in with another question there, and I'll park it here. Is there a best age to train technique for change of direction for young players to develop good posture and habits?
Yeah, the earlier the better. You know, it's more challenging at like at the higher end, right? So if you've got an athlete and you step into an inter-county setup and they've been playing since they were whatever age 5, and they haven't done any of this stuff or a lot of this type of training, haven't worked on their technique, all of a sudden it's another thing that you have to try and help them get better at alongside all the other things they need to be an inter-county footballer. Whereas if they started doing this type of stuff as a 12-year-old, particularly kind of pre-growth spurts, I think is a really good opportunity to do this. You know, they have a decade worth of change direction. You don't have to coach them now. You know, now it's all about the game and the tactical and the technical side. So the earlier the better with this stuff.
Perfect. And how many components of speed should we expose players to in one session? You know, are we looking at acceleration, change of direction, top end speed all in the one session, or would you block that out, and what way would that work or look like?
I think, well, classically we tend to split it into linear and multi, and having different days where you can focus on each, particularly for the max speed stuff. I think getting exposure twice a week, you know, whatever about what, you know, myself and Mike might feel about like trying to nudge people to those top end speeds to get faster. Sometimes it's actually tricky to get the players to do it because they're worried about injury. So I think it's quite a nice way to separate the week anyways, have a change direction focus and a linear focus. And you've 2 pitch sessions. So, you know, you don't get too much kind of wiggle room. You know, you're going to have some technique drills from a maximum speed perspective that you want to work on. And then you lead into your max speed stuff. You might even in the beginning of the warm up put some of those kind of timing type drills that I talked about in the change direction in. And then you have your similar sort of setup for the change direction day. I don't know, Mike, whether you do anything differently there or.
No, I totally concur, Neil. I think the other point worth making too is I would do 2 a week, obviously, and I would split it. With the max speed element, I'll always do a max speed 3 days before the game, but I'll also do max speed on game day. Basically, because of people who are not aware, it's brilliant for hamstring resilience and preventing hamstring injury. So at the end of my part of the warm-up on game day, we'll do 2 max speed runs before they go over and do the technical stuff. And again, if you're doing that on a regular basis, you know, you're hoping that you're building up that resilience game after game, session after session, and it can't do any harm. It doesn't fatigue them for the match anyway, which is good.
Perfect. Look, I think we'll leave it there. Some great questions, great answers. Finally, I just want to say a big thanks to Neil, Mike, Andrew for all coming on and sharing their knowledge and wisdom. Again, if anybody is looking at any more information around RYPT and what they offer, you can contact Rory. I suppose for myself, again, thanks for coming on. And if anybody does have any questions that maybe they don't have right now or they want to contact some of us later on, there's no issue. You can either contact me or Jack Cooney. My email is owen.mcnichol.ulster@ga.ie, and I'll try and get an answer back for you. And finally, just from my perspective, there's the level 1 athletic development course, which is run out by the GAA, and Gamespeed is actually one of the modules on that particular course. All right, so if anybody has any direction or wanting to go further within the athletic development and they're maybe not fully aware of some of the S&C jargon that maybe we're talking about, that's a good place to start, all right, before you develop onto maybe your S&C qualifications. All right, so that athletic development course, if you look on the Tubber website, there should be various dates and venues of that coming up across the country. So folks, thanks very much for coming on. Again, a big thanks to the guys for helping us out, and again, if any questions, you can contact us at the email.